The war between Israel and Palestine that has been going on since last October is a colonial war. It is a war between the colonizer, that is the Israeli army, and those seeking freedom, those are the Gazans. I want us to get into context of this war, which the media and Westerners have been claiming is maybe an unprovoked war that started on October 7th last year with Hamas attack on Israel. And I want to tell you, this war has a lot to do with our war, our Mau Mau war. Israel, what you call Israel now, as they call it, as the Jewish try to call it the Holy Land, is to English what they call the White Highlands. It's just a justification for them to take over land and continue occupying it. You might have heard some saying the Israelis are the Israelites. Maybe you might have heard the local pastor or your local elder or other people telling you to quote unquote pray for Israel and trying to convince you that they are the attacked holy people, and that displays the weakness of the Israeli narratives. Like they have nothing else left to justify. In fact, the so-called people calling themselves Israeli today, starting with their president, maybe President Herzog, Prime Minister, who nowadays calls himself Netanyahu, but he was called Milwinski before, are all Polish people, have Polish ancestry, and have Germanic names, so they have nothing to do with the Middle East. In fact, this is a DNA study that has been conducted that reveals very clearly that the Ashkenazi Jews have no Middle Eastern DNA. So these people never came from Middle East. These white Jews, who can very well be, can form the Fourth Reich after the third one formed by Hitler, have no roots in Middle East. So what they did is that before, in history, they lived in Europe in isolated communities, trying to propagate their perceived superiority complex. They didn't want to follow laws. They wanted to feel bigger than the law. They wanted to do their own things without following the society's rules wherever they were located. And at some time, this may have caused some backlash. And when they caused backlash, there were unfortunately pogroms. They were thrown out. And when that happened, some of them now developed a very good plan. They heard there was land in Middle East that was once inhabited by Israelites. And because they had somehow converted into Judaism, they thought that the land now could be called theirs. And with the money, they bought politicians, and the thing happened. There's something called Balfour Declaration. That is when some Zionists are these Germanic Polish Jews, Germanic Polish converts of Judaism that think that Israel should exist as a state for Jews, for those people who follow that thing as a religion. Note, those are the people who follow Judaism as a religion. They are not the descendants of Israelites. Get the picture now? I hope we are clear up to that point. And then after that, the British realized that they could use Israel, that territory then was called Palestine, to propagate their interest in Middle East. So they knew they would form a state there, call it Israel, and maybe brainwash your religious leaders to think that they are the real Israelis that you should, maybe worship or pray for. And if you don't, maybe God will be angry and destroy your country and curse you. And then they get you emotionally invested to think that now your life depends on supporting murder, supporting theft, supporting bombing of civilians. And with a heavy heart, I note that so far 38,000 Gazans have been killed, women and children. And it's in this process that those who get you emotionally invested to lie to you will tell you that this war started on October 7th, 2023. That's when Hamas conducted a very successful raid in Israel. and took hostages with the purpose of negotiating with the Israeli regime to release about 7,000 Palestinian hostages that have been held in Israeli prisons without trial for a long time. So I believe up to this point, I have shown you background information of how the Zionists came to be. And at the same time, while the Zionism, that is the development of a political movement of white Jewish converts wanting to return to Israel. When that was happening, there were real Jews, some of them that may have had direct links to Israelites of the Bible in Europe. So such that during the World War, these Zionists, with collaboration with powers that be then, that I don't want to mention, orchestrated a program in which the real Jews now, those Semites that might have come from Middle East, were systematically targeted. And then there was a greater justification for Europe to ship all of them to quote unquote their land. There are very many documents and documentaries that show the so-called Jews being shipped by vessels to Palestine. It was then called Palestine. And there is also evidence that the Jews themselves, the real Jews themselves in Europe, noted that the Zionists were as evil as Hitler's forces in violating them in those camps. So you noted that maybe those Zionists used manipulation to get all the other Jews thinking that they are being targeted all across Europe, so that now they can form a justification for wanting to be moved to Middle East, to Palestine then. I hope we are together up to that point. And when these people, the Zionists and the Jews, were coming from Europe, they, of course, because they came from Europe, a richer region, they came with resources, they came with military training. They came straight and started a terrorist organization called Haganah. They call it rebel, but even in their records show that this organization participated in committing terrorist acts, in bombing mosques, in conducting raids on Arab villages, and killing people. So when they tell you that the only massacre that happened is October 7th, that's a lie. Haganah terrorist group, the precursor to the current day IDF, conducted a lot of massacres. Here is a list. All of them targeted towards the local Arab Palestinian population to force them to flee. And this happened in the 1946, 47, and 48, such that all Arab cities, Jerusalem, Haifa, Tel Aviv, and others, which were really successful then by that day's standards, were cleansed of the Arabic populations. And then these, as Jews were being shipped in, quote unquote, Jews were being shipped in from Europe and being given money to start prefabricated houses, forming settlements, and that continued. That is when the UN in 1947 decided to do the first partition. Somehow the UN, with its imperfect political structure, thought that now the European Jews, or the so-called returnees, the Jews, quote unquote, should coexist with the Arabs, and then partitioned the past partition. A significant amount of land was given to Jews, a significant percentage was given to Palestinians. That is in two territories, West Bank, Gaza, and around East Jerusalem. However, with the greed of the Jews and support from the West, from the colonialists, and the Haganah terrorist group, they continued terrorizing and expanding out of the territory allocated for Jews, systematically cleansing and squeezing the Arab, the Palestinians. And I want you to know that those Palestinians you see today, some of them might have been real children of Abraham. It's only that through time may have converted to other religions, Islam or Christianity. And I want you to know something about succession and inheritance of land. It is done on bloodline, not religion. So if some of them, and a good number of them who has been in Middle East for that long, are true descendants of Abraham, of Isaac, or Jacob, then they have more claim to that land than these European returnees. So I was where the Haganahs were continuing to conduct terrorist group attacks and more massacres, as you can see here, systematically pushing the Palestinians even further, squeezing them further into West Bank and into Gaza, and also forcing others out. By 1948, when the state, the quote-unquote Jewish state was declared, the apartheid policy of Israeli government continued. And when you hear them calling or lying to you that this war started on October, here is a statement, a neology that was read of some guy who is called Rutenberg. Rutenberg, not that Germanic name. He was killed in Gaza, lived in a kibbutz. Kibbutz is a settlement that is meant to, a military settlement meant to enforce, to enclose Palestinians into their villages. It's just like in Kenya, when we used to live in settlement, around these settlements were white camps for colonialists. That's the same case. Then this Rutenberg was murdered by Arabs. And as you can see in this eulogy that was read by this guy called Moshe Dayan, just read it and see. He admits that they stole land from Arabs. That was 1952, about 6 years before, established a state, left Gazans and those in West Bank as refugees in their own countries, and then they were naturally boiling with anger, looking for a day to retaliate. So this eulogy of 1956, that is 1956, will show you that the war did not start in 2023. It had been going for 6 years then, and the Gazans and the other side and the West Bank have been arming and preparing themselves, not necessarily even to fight Israel, but maybe to prevent being eradicated, because Israel has been receiving a lot of arms and ammunition from the US, the UK, Germany, France, to eliminate all Palestinians and to expand. Their goal is usually not to only establish Israel in Palestine, but also to expand it. Here is the plan for Greater Israel, occupying other lands, including in Syria, in Egypt. In fact, imagine in Egypt, in Jordan, even in Saudi Arabia, and maybe even Iraq. Just imagine having such a small country of white colonialists now wanting to expand across the entire region. That's why anytime you hear Israel is bombing this or that country in the region under various justifications. And you remember even in 1980s, the state of Israel, citing very shaky grounds, and intervened in the Lebanese civil war, in which France and the UK were the real movers of that war, and then tried to steal in Lebanese territory south of Litani River. And then it was defeated. That is when this party called Hezbollah started and defeated Israel. But I don't want us to go in the direction of Hezbollah. I'll go into it in future. So I want just to show you how this Israeli quote-unquote government is just, an expansionist, militaristic, terrorist organization. And note this one, the IDF logo borrows from the Haganah logo, a terrorist organization. So it's the same terror that has been going on, such that now Israel continues to terrorize other people, including killing Egyptians, as you saw here, occupying Syria, as you can see, fighting Lebanon, as you can see, and also trying to systematically eradicate Palestinians. Now, in the 1960s and 70s and 80s, including in the 90s, the US purported to start a negotiation to establish a Palestinian state. It organized the Palestinian Authority, Palestinian Liberation Organization, to negotiate with the Israeli government to establish two-state solution. But the US used its influence, force, lies, and bribes to bribe Palestinian Liberation Organization to become a Palestinian Authority, to recognize Israeli state, but Israeli state was not forced to recognize Palestine. And PA then, Palestinian Authority was forced to enter into some agreement with Israel to assist it, quote unquote, to ensure its stability or security. That means now Israel now would outsource some of its services to Palestinian Authority to continue now blackmailing, killing, and allow Palestinians and allowing Israel to do whatever it wanted with with West Bank territory. That's why, since then, you can notice there's a chart that has been developed showing the number of the politicians globally and the salaries they receive. And among them, you realize that Palestinian Authority receive the highest salaries. How is that? The country even cannot afford that. That is the bribe that the US, the UK gives to Israel, to Palestinian Authority to allow Israel to continue now systematically eradicating Palestinians in the West Bank. Since the 1990s, when the Oslo Accords were signed, other Palestinians noted that they were given a raw deal, protested, armed themselves, and when Israel noted that they were arming themselves, it infiltrated some, including Hamas, gave some arms, just enough money through third parties to ensure Hamas could launch some just minimally successful attack, just to justify Israel now eradicating the entire of Gazan population. And I want you to show you how just evil Israel government has been, such that even in West Bank, where it gained power through Palestinian Authority, to conduct some of its operations there, it has been eradicating these people, Palestinians in the West Bank. It has been bulldozing homes. The European Foreign Commission, Joseph Borrell here, stated very well how Israel has resettled over 750,000 people in West Bank. Just imagine, even now the territory that was awarded to Palestine, which Israel has been systematically squeezing, now is stealing all of it. Now is moving in even more settlers to ensure now even West Bank is dissolved, is now occupied by Israelis. Just how evil is that? And that has been going between 1996 and 2023. That's when 750,000 Israelis, terrorists, like they call very violent settlers that have been settling there, just like we had our white settlers here killing people, have been settling in West Bank, killing Palestinians, bulldozing homes, bulldozing roads, mosques, and whatever. On the other hand, the Israeli state has now enclosed Gaza into an open-air prison, blockaded the oceans such that they cannot use the Mediterranean Sea for importing and exporting their goods, enclosed them with a fence, search them in inhumane ways even when they want to go to Alaska mosque worship or something, preventing them from moving, sporadically bombing infrastructure in Gaza, pretending they present any threat, and repeatedly targeting people in assassination programs. So these are some of the things that Gazans have had to endure since they've been there. And if you live under such conditions, you must always think of ways of getting out. If you're a Kenyan and want to judge Gazans as terrorists, just remember where we've come from. Remember the Mau Mau people. Remember our people. Remember what they gave anything. They fought with arrows and bows and crude guns against the colonial English fighting machine and defeated it. So if you want to blame Gazans for being terrorists, for heaven's sake, remember they even said Mau Mau was terrorist. So you are not less terrorist. As a Kenyan, you are not less terrorist than a Gazan. So let's know which kind of the story we are in. We should not be lied to. We must not allow ourselves to support colonialism, modern day colonialism, terrorism, and theft conducted by white people so that they can just have their military outpost in Palestine to continue ruling Middle East and causing terror and threatening us. So if you ever wondered how this war is going, Israel-Palestine war, that's just a brief history I wanted to introduce you to. is a topic that I will be making videos about in future. And I want to tell you, like, the story of how these Jewish Zionists, Zionists trying to call Israel Holy Land and to steal it, they're just like the Britons calling Kenya White Highlands and claiming we don't belong here because we are not white, but they do because they are. So please, Kenyans, let's know which side of history we are in. Palestinians should deserve a state like we do, like we fought for ours. Let's not be brainwashed into attacking them when they are calling for the right that we won through war. Yeah, so kindly like and subscribe if you like my content, and be ready that I'll be producing other videos expounding more on this topic of interest to us, including in the context that even the Britons are planning now to someday return into Kenya. And we Kenyans, the more we support them in supporting Israel over Palestinians, the more we make it easy for them to justify when they finally return and claim Kenya as White Highland. So let's be alert so that we are not used as tools. Kenyans, thank you. Simon, Context Channel, like, subscribe, share.